Thank you for that warm introduction, and I would like to thank the conference committee for inviting me to share today, which is what I'm doing. I'm sharing, and sharing can be a scary thing, and I want to acknowledge that. It's not something that, it's something that I often have to push myself to do, but I believe it's so important to share because learning does not occur without sharing. And I think that's true in any context. If you're talking about a classroom, or if you're talking about being a parent, right? And I have some examples that I literally just jotted down this morning as I was leaving my hotel room. So this is not a comprehensive list, but I just wanted to reference something that Steve Hargadon said yesterday when he talked to, how many of you heard Steve's talk? Good, a lot of you, most of you. He talked about the short tail, which was all about how today's participatory culture enables sharing, regardless of who you are, right? And so these are some of the things that I've learned from sharing. In 1997, I created my blog, sitting in a conference, in a session at a conference, a tech ed conference, where I had two teachers in front of the room talking about how they created their own blogs. In 1997, I learned about VoiceThread and how to use it from an art historian who had a blog and wrote a blog post about VoiceThread. Her name is Beth Harris, and she's now the Director of Digital Media for the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I learned podcasting in 1997 from Donna Eystone in a variety of ways, who shares her expertise in desktop seminars, pre-conference workshops, classes, as well as her books that she now has published on Smashwords, right? Which is another tool I learned about from Donna, who shared that with me. I learned Twitter through a variety of blog posts and guides that are shared openly online. I learned about women artists in Latin America and how to buy their online, how to buy their work online to support their livelihood and community through a wiki that one of my students created for one of my classes. I learned from Seth Godin. Who's a marketing guru. I learn from him every single morning through a brief blog post that is delivered into my email box, and I pick up my iPhone or my iPad, which is right next to my bed, and I read those every morning before I get out of bed, and they inspire me. I learn every day from the hundreds of Twitter users I follow and the individuals who contact me through my blog or after a presentation like this one. And it's amazing to me how many people I meet in 3 dimensions who I've never met before but come to me and say, I've been to your blog, I learned this, I downloaded this, thank you for sharing it with a Creative Commons license because I use it with my students. And I learned from Anya Kamenetz, Sir Ken Robinson, and many other well-known individuals that were shared through Steve Hargadon's Future of Education series, which is free. And he has several of these amazing interviews every week in Blackboard Collaborate that he archives and are also available at any other time. And by the way, many of those were while I was at the gym listening to them on my phone. So that's a little bit about how that short tail has inspired me, and I think one of the reasons why it is so important to think about sharing and continuing to create content even though we are in content overload mode, right? Okay, so with that said, I'm here today to share really my experiences, my journey as a teacher. I was a full-time professor of art history at Sierra College for 7 years, and I went through quite a transformation in that process. And I just want to share a little bit about that with you, and I'm hopeful that each of you may take one little nugget away from this and share it in a variety of ways. And one of those may be Twitter. The idea of me standing up here and talking to you for an hour is completely antithetical to the whole concept of participatory society. So one of the ways we can make this social is by tweeting. And I welcome you all, I encourage you all, anyone who has a laptop or a smartphone in your hand, you can do that today by starting to tweet if you so desire. And if not, you can follow the tweets by going to Twitter and searching for hashtag OTC11. And I'll have that in the bottom corner of some of my slides in case you forget that hashtag. So this is an online teaching conference. I believe that today, let me ask a question. You're online teachers, or you're about to be, or someday you'll be online teachers, right? That's why we're at this conference. You have an interest in it. How many of you also teach face-to-face? We're not just online teachers, right? We teach on campus and we teach online. That's really important. And what I find really important in this conversation is how online learning is going to continue to transform what we do on campus with our students, okay? And that's really what I'm going to get to in this presentation. And this is a quote by Clayton Christensen. He says, "At first, online learning was most often used for distance learning. Increasingly, however, online learning is being implemented in brick and mortar schools in what is called blended learning. The content is becoming more and more robust for individual learners so that it motivates students to engage in deeper learning, and the communication technology is enhancing the ability of teachers and students to interact." And that is exactly what I think I have been striving to do in my own teaching and what I hope to demonstrate to you. And I know that many of you that have taken classes with me, as you learn about online teaching, you go, oh, and I could do this in my on-campus class, right? How could those two merge? It's hard to figure that out, isn't it? You kind of see it and get the feeling, but how do you make it work? So how do we get there? How do we get there? There is no one single path. We're all going to get there in our own unique way, depending on your style, what you're comfortable doing, depending on your discipline, and that's really important to recognize. But I believe that you need to see models. You need to see examples, or else it can get frustrating and very difficult, and that's where sharing comes into play. So my story starts about 5.5 years ago when I found out that I needed open heart surgery. You're going to see a lot of really strange connections to Steve Hargadon's presentation yesterday. The heart is just one of them. It's kind of weird. Yeah, so I found out I needed open heart surgery, and it was the most trying time of my life, beyond doubt. And it was at the end of a very busy semester. I was teaching a full load of classes, and I was dealing with finals and presentations and projects. I had a 3- and a 5-year-old at home. It's a very difficult time in my life. But I went on and I learned a lot about the human heart. And as educators, as you all know, when you've got some kind of traumatic experience, you've got to understand it, right? You have to know it. You have to understand it. So I learned a lot about the human heart, and I learned a lot about this device that was soon going to be implanted in my chest in the coming weeks. I even had the opportunity to meet with a surgeon who gave me a prototype of this device and allowed me the kinesthetic learning experience of holding that device, right? So I really kind of was getting lots of data, lots of statistics. All of that was great. But I really, really needed more. I really needed more. Now, mind you, this was the winter of 2006. Okay, so try to put yourself back into what was going on in 2006 and what, in terms of online technologies. I found myself going online. I had my laptop, and at that time we're in the midst of Web 1.0, hinging upon Web 2.0. Now, Steve yesterday talked a little bit about those differences, and I'll get into them more in a bit, just as a refresher. I stumble upon a website, as I'm learning more facts and information, I stumble upon a website called valvereplacement.org, at which time my husband replied, "There really is a website for everything, isn't there?" But this was more than a website. This was a place where I was able to enter and experience a variety of different forums. So when I entered these forums, for example, the pre-surgery forum, which was directly relevant to my experiences, I was automatically put in touch with individuals around the world who were in the same boat I was in, but also individuals who were on what they came to call the other side, on the other side, right? The people who'd survived it. 20 years ago I had this surgery, and it gave me the understanding that this is all going to be fine. I'm going to get through this. It was also in that pre-surgery forum where I met a woman from Australia who had the same condition I had, who had 2 young boys at home, and it was awaiting the same surgery I was awaiting. And it was that website, it was that online experience that allowed me to find my community. It allowed me to find where I fit in, and it brought the social element of my learning that was so lacking to my presence. I was able to find that. Learning is social. We know that. That's old hat. Learning is social. We know that. And this was the pivotal moment for me when I realized that this computer, right, enables me to connect with other humans, which adds the social element of learning. And that was really important. But as I noted, what I didn't realize, now we have that perspective, what was about to happen in the next year or so, that was when Web 2.0 was breaking open. That was when YouTube was out then, I believe, but I remember actually a student coming to me and telling me about YouTube, and I thought in my head, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. It's just a big empty website, right? How is that going to change anything? So I've come to know that when I think something's stupid, I really need to pay attention. So between 1996 and around 2006, I'm sorry, is when Web 2.0 really started breaking open. And again, it's when content became, it's when the websites moved beyond static content, right? When going online as a user now became an opportunity to not only participate and share your ideas, but to create. Right? To leave a comment on something someone else has created, or to create your own content and share. And that's what YouTube is, right? Now, since that point, again, following on Steve's coattails a bit here, Facebook has, as you know, about 500 million users. 70% of them are outside of the US. 250 million users access Facebook through their mobile device. And mobile is really imperative. It really is shifting the whole concept of participation. And we saw that on the streets in Egypt. Used by 95% of 18 to 24-year-old college students in the US, and 70% of them on a daily basis. And it's only been around for 7 years. YouTube. There's more video uploaded in 60 days on YouTube than was created by the 3 major US TV networks in 60 years. More than 50% of those videos are rated by other users. YouTube is a social network. 2010, there were 700 billion playbacks. I think 100 billion were by my kids. YouTube mobile, 100 million views per day. So again, that mobile access. You know, we think about video. A lot of times I hear professors and teachers say that video has to be perfect, pristine, high quality. This is the YouTube generation. You know, they're watching more and more. I know smartphones haven't reached the saturation point, but this year, the sale of smartphones is predicted to outpace the sale of desktops and laptops. As the sale point comes down, as Catherine Hillman said to me, part of the research is showing that as the price of video games come down on smartphones, more and more parents are buying them because they can give them to their kids and say, here, play a game. Not that I do that, but 5 years old. 5 years old. So the speed at which this is occurring is incredible. On Twitter, there are still an average of 450,000 new accounts being created per day, 1 billion tweets sent per week, and Twitter mobile saw a 182% increase in the last year. And I know what most of you in this room are thinking who aren't on Twitter. Twitter's stupid, Twitter's superficial, right? Twitter has changed the way I learn. And I know there are others in this room who feel that way because you've come to me and you've shared that with me after you created that Twitter account in my Building Online Community Social Media class. So yes, it has tremendous potential. 3 years old. The era of participation has really changed the way that we experience life. More importantly for this presentation and this conference, the way that we learn, the way that our students are learning. And the way many of us learn now, some of us hopefully will begin to participate and experience the learning, because if you don't participate, this is what I've learned, you don't understand it. You don't get the relevance of it. Participation is really critical. And it doesn't mean you have to be on the wave. And by the way, if that was really me on that wave, I'd be screaming my head off, because half the time I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying new things and trying to work through them. So know that you can, dip your toe in. You don't have to be riding that wave. And also, in terms of those reviews, they're really essential, because now, and we did this last night before we went to dinner, we looked up a restaurant and we looked at it on Yelp and it had good reviews, and we went to it and I said, I really hope this is good or it's going to really make my presentation bomb tomorrow. But it was great, wasn't it? Yeah. We went to a great sushi place in Costa Mesa, a hole in the wall. I would never have walked in the place if I hadn't looked at those reviews on my phone. So the way that we are valuing information, the way that we're making decisions, the way that we're making choices is really based upon what we think as collective intelligence. It's the participation that creates that community, right? It's the sharing that creates that community. And also on Yelp, by the way, you can see photographs that real people took of the real food served at those restaurants, which looks very different from the pictures on the websites, right? And also pictures of hotel rooms on TripAdvisor. And participatory learning looks different. In participatory learning, you're learning in community. And we now have a culture of learning. This is a book that was published in 2009, funded by the MacArthur Foundation, which is doing fabulous research, funding fabulous research about how digital media is transforming learning. And this quote says, "Since the current generation of college students has no memory of the historical moment before the advent of the internet, we are suggesting that participatory learning as a practice is no longer exotic or new, but a commonplace way of socializing and learning. For many, it seems entirely unremarkable." And when you think about participatory, again, I'm a visual person, my discipline is art history, I need to see pictures. And when I saw these two pictures that were created and shared with me by Lori Burris, who works for lynda.com, she used to be a faculty member at Pasadena City College, some of you may know Lori, she said, yeah, go ahead and share them. Just attribute me, which I've done. Participatory learning on your right. Do we all recognize the learning on the left? Where does that typically happen? The classroom? Right. And it may not be your classroom. I realize we've got a variety of teaching and learning styles in here. But I would argue that if we were to walk into a randomly selected college classroom somewhere in the United States, we'd be seeing the model on the left, right? And so it's that gap that I think a lot about in terms of the way that our students are learning outside of the classroom and in the classroom. And I want to show you one more visual that I found really compelling. So what I'm showing you here is a visualization of activity on Twitter following a hashtag Jan25, which was a hashtag that became synonymous with the Egyptian Revolution. And this was what was happening on Twitter on February 11th, 2011. And the individual noted at the bottom of the page, whose name I'll probably say wrong, so I won't say it, but he was recording this when Mubarak was just about to make his announcement, but he didn't know it. What you're seeing are tweets, and each little node is a tweet, and anytime you see it connect with another node, it's a retweet. And when you see that kind of webbing, it gets retweeted to that person's followers, and that's how Twitter works. I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. So this is the time of the announcement. This is an hour later. So you start to understand how a communication tool like that, which is can be used from a smartphone, is really starting to change the world and help people organize. This kind of democratization of communication is really pretty amazing. Now, another observation that I see as I look out in general at the use of the internet in higher education, the internet is still viewed as a delivery method. Whereas to our students, it's a culture that's grounded in participatory learning. And when I think about students coming into our classrooms on campus, I get concerned about that irrelevance and that gap. And I've heard students say, and these are not 18 to 24-year-old students, I've heard older students say, why do I need to be there when I'm being talked to for an hour or 3 hours, right? When I can pick up my cell phone or go on YouTube and be talked to in the same type of way. So I think about that, and I wonder if we're using our class time as effectively as we could or should be? And if we're using online technologies as effectively as we could or should be? And those are the questions that I think about. But I also think about my kids. My son, Jack, is 10 years old, and about 2 or 3 years ago, we bought him a little digital video camera. Gave it to him, didn't really know what he was going to do with it. You know, another one of those moments where I'm just going to do it and see what happens and, you know, apply my parental guidance. And so he leaves with his camera, and he comes back about an hour later, and he gives me his camera, and he goes, "Here, Mommy, I want to put this on YouTube." And I went, you know, alarms, oh, Lord, what did you tape? But it was fascinating, because what he taped, he was very into Pokemon, which I'm sure many of you in this room know what Pokemon is. It's a video game. He went upstairs, he took out his DS, which is what he plays his Pokemon on. He took out his digital camera, and he recorded his screen, capturing a particular character that he was really proud of capturing. He came downstairs, and he wanted to share that on YouTube. And it took me a while to kind of understand, but what he was doing was giving back to his community, because he learns on YouTube. He goes to YouTube to learn how to play his games. And it's through the sharing of other videos that he learns from. And the first thing that he was naturally inclined to do, that I didn't even understand, was to give back to his community, to share. So that's the generation that, you know, is amongst us. And I think that that's really, really significant. Michael Wesch is an anthropologist at Kansas State University. I'm sure many of you know who he is. And he's done a variety of fabulous projects. One of them that he started this year, it's tagged VOST 2011 on YouTube if you want to search for some of the videos. But he put out an open call to college students to send in videos that demonstrate their learning, how it feels to learn in college today. And then all those submitted videos are shared with a Creative Commons license, which enables you to remix them. So then he actually encourages the remixing of these videos to create new videos. So when you do that search, you're going to find a variety of things. You'll find submissions, and you'll also find remixes. And he did one remix shortly after the submissions started coming in. And this was just a still. I'm not going to share the video because it's actually pretty hard to read some of the text in it. But this is a still that has stuck with me. This student who painted her face white and put an X over her mouth, right? And that experience, someone who's used to learning through participatory culture, being put in a room and being spoke to. Another part of the video that really sticks with me is a student who videotaped his desk and wrote on a sticky, what is he saying? What is she saying, right? That wondering. Yeah. It's kind of an interesting shift in paradigm. And this irrelevance that it is starting to breed really does start to concern me. So for me as a teacher, again, going through back to my experience after I kind of had this, and I had time off, I didn't mention, after my heart surgery. I had a whole semester off. What am I going to do with a whole semester off? I don't do well with time off. So I was on my laptop, and I was learning. I was learning through blogs. A lot of that I read at the beginning happened at that time. Now, I know what you're saying, well, I don't have time, and I totally recognize that, and you're absolutely right. It's a very difficult predicament that we're all in. But that is when I started to learn, and that's when I started to implement many of these new technologies into my online classes. So some of the things that I started doing, that's what I want to share with you first, the online class transformations, okay? So at this time, coming back in 2007, I was teaching online and on campus. And I started to develop my lectures, which I had written out as PDFs and shared with my students in my class. I began to podcast them, thank you, Donna Eystone, and share them with my students. Now, when I did that, I didn't take away the PDFs. I kept them there because it made the audio accessible, and it also allowed for students to have a choice, and I wanted them to have a choice in how they were going to learn the content. So that, in one sense, it's nothing at all revolutionary, but it allowed for me to bring my presence into my class much more, which was really important. And I was begging the question of how to enhance the course management learning experience, largely because of the fact that I teach a visual discipline, and it was difficult for me to create visually centric learning environments in my course management system at the time. So one of the things that I did was I enhanced my course management system by having students interact in a social network that I created with Ning, which was entirely free at the time. And by the way, the basic Ning plan is now being funded for educators in North America, higher ed and K-12, for at least the next year. If it's something you'd want to experiment with, it would still be free. Being funded by Pearson. Did I say that? Give kudos to Pearson. And so my students were in a CMS. They had content that they were accessing in the CMS. They had learning objectives. They would go into Ning, where they would access their own blog, create a weekly blog post, and also have the opportunity to share pictures or videos that applied to our course content in some way. And that enabled students to share pictures of places that they had traveled to, different types of architectural sites around the world, trips to museums, and they were going into YouTube and sharing videos that related to our course content. None of that second part, the blogging was required, all the other, it was just an option. And all of that began to be populated by students, which began to create a very personalized and relevant experience for that group of students, distinctive to them. The blog enabled participatory learning, and this is just a screenshot of one blog post. It was one of the bigger projects that the students had to do that I've done since the first day I taught art appreciation. Go to an art museum, right? Specific criteria that you need to fill, reflect on your experience, analyze your favorite work of art. It used to be, send it to me, I'll read them all, leave my notes, and send it back to them. Well, they started sharing them on their blogs. And so that enabled the students to comment on each other's work, learn from each other, and it was really exciting to see the students start to say, oh, we were out there on the same day, we went to the same museum, or you liked that piece of work, I couldn't stand that one, I liked this one. And so it added that bubbling up of that participatory learning, much more dynamic than just getting a grade from their instructor. And I also, as I noted, discovered a web-based application called VoiceThread, which had no cost to the student and provides conversations around media, and the comments can be left in voice, video, or text. And it was VoiceThread that I used to start to theorize a way to create learning activities different from discussion boards that were centered around images, and that empowered me to assess my students in new ways. And I'm going to show you a clip of a VoiceThread from one of my online students. So this is one slide in a much longer voice thread where students had to go in and select one image and analyze either the image's form or content, which are new terms for the students, and these are introductory art appreciation students.
I am going to analyze this image's form. I see a very young woman with her eyes closed. She could possibly be dead or alive. She looks more alive to me because she does have some color, even though it's very pale.
Jacqueline, I want to jump in here.
First
of all, say thank you so much for leaving our first voice comment. That's so appreciated. In your comment, though, and this is a really good learning experience, so I hope you don't feel badly for giving us an opportunity to learn from this, because this is really important. This is what this is all about. You did describe the work's form in that content, which is what you set out in that comment, which is what you set out to do, but you also described the contents. So again, this is a learning moment.
So I'm going to pause that and explain what's happening there. That's a student who's left her contribution, and that's me going back in and leaving a video comment back to that student, teaching. And oftentimes we still hear, online learning is cold, online learning is disconnected. Well, I want to show you the follow-up to this, her comment back to me. I talked a long time.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for listening to my very first voice thread. I was a little nervous, and I think for me it would be easier just to type the answer. But that is why I'm going to use the voice comment. It challenges me on many different levels. This is my first art appreciation class, my first blog, and the voice thread is intimidating. Thank you for clarifying the form and content information. I listened to my comment again and yours. The form would be that the image is rectangular with an oval shape in the center in very soft, light colors.
Jacqueline, this is just for you. I'm going to get up and give you a standing ovation.
Those are the moments, you know, those are the moments. So I think that you're each going to take something different away from that. I don't know what it'll be, but I think about what my student said there about how it was intimidating and how she's pushing herself. Not all students use the voice comments. In fact, most of my students don't. But that's what it's about, is giving them a choice. And some of them do because it helps them learn. Some of them do because they just like to talk. Some of them do because they want to challenge themselves and try something new. And those students at the end of the semester who try something new are so empowered by what they've gained. And I found from my experiences what's absolutely critical is to be sure that they know that I know they can do it. That's what they need. So when you look at that participatory model, a lot of times I hear from instructors, well, I'm not important anymore. I'm not even there. That's so not true. Because without you at the helm, without you telling your students that they can do this, and demonstrating why you're using a new tool, right? Because students also don't know, why do I have to do this? This is just another new tool. We kind of have this myth that they're just excited about using lots of different tools. I don't think that's true. But if you can demonstrate, and you should be able to demonstrate why you've integrated it, and share feedback from other students about how it's enhanced their learning, they're going to get through those reluctant early weeks. I really do believe that. So something else real quickly, if you think about participatory content, let me say this, not participatory content. If you think about digital media, it's very visual and robust. This was my syllabus, which I thought was really cool because I had a little black and white clip art icon on it, right? That's an art appreciation syllabus. Page 2 of 10, yeah, right? So I started recognizing the shift in the type of information, and look at television screens today and how layered with visual information they are, right? We've got all kinds of stuff running across the bottom and icons, and the layers are so rich. And so the visual it plays an important role. It can also be too much, but it can be used effectively to really help students learn information in different ways, recognize information that they may gloss over. So what I started to do was create a visual syllabus that integrated, it was participatory in the sense that I was showcasing some of the images that students had shared in previous semesters on their own blogs. I included screenshots of the tools that they'd be using, so they'd start to see these tools from the very first moment they opened the syllabus, right? So and a description of them and why we're using them and what a blog is and why it's going to be an important role in their learning experience. Sharing information in text as well as visual graphics, thinking about universal design for learning, some of those items wrapped into that theory. And also images from the curriculum, which I thought was really interesting because students could go in at first and the images would be unrecognizable, but then as they learned about them in class and they come back to the syllabus, there's the sense of, hey, I know what that is now. We talked about that. And that's a pretty exciting thing for students. So that syllabus was an exciting, groundbreaking change that I made, and students loved it, And I remember students coming to me finding typos that typically weren't found in my syllabi. They're reading them. And also saying things to me like, I can tell you really care about your class. Now this was the hard part, because that part, learning the tools, was hard, but this was the way harder part, how to integrate it into my on-campus class. How do I merge the two? So there I am, and I had this amazing participatory, dynamic online experience with my online students, and I come into my on-campus classes and I'm still talking to them. We do discussions, right? But the heart and soul, the expectation of them is to come into a class, put their feet up, and do the glazed eyes thing. That's the expectation. And so when I'm in the middle of a lecture, I'd break out, okay, let's have a discussion now. They're like, You know, and that's what was happening. And I know that I'm assuming many of you can relate to that. So how do I make this transformation? And, you know, after, I don't know, I guess it was a year or so, probably longer, I was just going crazy with I'm like, Michelle, you have all these lectures developed in podcast form. And you're standing here talking to your students, sharing the same lectures. So for a while, I shared them as resources. You can go back and go through that, and that just didn't work so well because nothing was changing. So here's what I realized now. I didn't know this at the time. This is from an article by Bar and Tag from 1995, not new stuff, 1995. Article titled From Teaching to Learning, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The shift from an instruction paradigm to a learning paradigm. I had fully made the shift online. Okay, and I want to just acknowledge some of the differences. The instructional paradigm is focused on a transfer of knowledge from faculty to students. Learning paradigm is focused on eliciting students' discovery and construction of knowledge. Instruction, covering material. Learning, achieves specified learning results. Instruction, faculty role is lecturer. Learning, faculty role is designer of learning methods and environments. It's like cooking. It's like creating your own recipe. Instruction, achieving access for diverse student groups. Learning, achieving learning success for diverse student groups. So, where I was online was fully in that learning paradigm. Face-to-face on campus, my mind was in learning, but my environment was still instructional. And that's where I was stuck. That was a hard place for me to get past. And it may be helpful for you to identify your own paradigm as well as your institution's paradigm. So I came across this quote by Albert Einstein, which was very helpful to me. He said, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results." So I realized it was really time for me to do something drastic. So I flipped my classroom. This term is new. When I was doing this, I didn't know what I was doing, but now it's actually picking up quite a bit of momentum. Steve referred to it yesterday, flipping the classroom, the flipped classroom, and that's essentially what I was doing. So let me tell you why first before I share the model with you. Remember the notion of making the time together, breathing the same air, which Andrea Henny shared with me yesterday, the breathing the same air time with my students, more participatory, right? So if we think about Bloom's taxonomy in the cognitive domain, we've got remembering and understanding at the bottom that are foundational, and we've got applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating up at the top. Rote memorization really is what occurs towards the bottom, right? Deep learning occurs as we reach the top of that pyramid. That's where and remember that first slide, online learning has the potential to create and inspire deep learning, okay? So my goal was to really reduce that classroom time with focusing on the understanding and the remembering, and increase the classroom time with my students, fostering those higher level skills. And it occurred to me that it was the higher level skills that I was assessing them on. The essays that they would write, the comparison essays in art history, the papers that they would write, a lot of that I was assessing at the top of the pyramid, but I was spending all my time with them at the lower end, or the majority of the time at the lower end. So what I started doing, and there was a report that came out last year from the Center for Community College Student Engagement, which is an outstanding report called The Heart of Student Success, and it really focuses on the importance of deep learning, fostering more deep learning to increase our degree attainment, which I thought was just a beautiful thing to focus on. Not talking about access and fees, it's talking about the quality of our students' learning environments in the degree attainment path. It's a great report, but they don't talk about online technologies. So I developed a new model, and I really wanted to take take advantage of some of this untethered learning that was becoming so popular. And the Khan Academy, again, cited yesterday by Steve Hargadon, and Salman Khan he has several degrees from MIT, and he started creating videos to tutor his nephews, math videos to tutor his nephews. And his nephews were giving him this great feedback, oh, this is great, you're so much better on video, they're actually saying to him. We like you so much better. And so he started taking those videos and putting them online, and people started flocking to them. So he kept doing it. He had a little studio in his home, I think in his closet. And this is a shot of one of his videos, so it's actually quite visual. Well, now he's received, I don't even know how many awards. He received I think more than $1 million Innovator Award from Google. His company, he now has a team doing this. They just received funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to translate all these videos into multiple languages. They're all shared openly online. You can access them through a site or through YouTube. They now cover every topic in mathematics you can imagine, including, he's also developing, I think, biology and world history videos. And remember that the community comments on these. And that's really key, because the comments are open comments, and the comments will come in and say, there'll be a teacher from somewhere that'll come in and say, great video, but about a third of the way through, you need to refine this, and he'll refine it. So he's embracing the community to improve his content, and that's a really important part of participatory learning. Also, lynda.com, iTunes U, TED, and I just threw some things up here. There's so many things. I mean, this slide could go on and on and on, all the blogs out there that I've learned from. But again, untethered learning, meaning you don't have to be in a specific place at a specific time to learn this, right? And the ability to access it mobily. And what we have happening now, which I didn't have at the time, was Creative Commons, which is really shifting our culture and really embracing this concept of sharing. And when we share more through Creative Commons licensing, there are more opportunities for dynamic course content to integrate. So the burden then isn't completely upon me to learn all these technologies and create all of my content. I can now have my students learning from multiple art historians. So this was my model that's going to reveal itself to you here. The content in my class, again, this was an on-campus listed as a traditional class. The content was organized into learning units. This is going to look very similar to online course design, right? Again, I'm taking a lot of the effective practices of online course design. Anchored by learning objectives, there was a reading assignment and a mobile lecture that the students would access outside of the classroom. There was a pre-class voice thread that I integrated that they would access and complete, they'd participate in before coming to class. That was my assessment point, so that they would have to access, read, listen to the lecture, read the content to participate in the voice thread effectively. Then what I was able to do, after that was done, I could watch it, listen to it, before I walked in my classroom. So when my students came into the classroom, I had notes taken, and that didn't take me very long to click through that and listen and access it, but I had notes taken about my students, about who had made amazing contributions that I could then play in class and have the student expand upon. I knew which topics people were really kind of getting, and I knew which ones we had to tease through a little bit more. So that was my starting point, rather than just presenting content and assuming everyone was at the same level. Creating a more relevant experience for the students. After that would happen, we spent time moving up into the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And this is, I mean, as teaching art history, this is when things really get fun, when you can have the students engage in analysis, construction, or deconstruction, and debate, critiquing concepts and asking questions. That's where the classroom time was spent. And then after they left class, I had another post-class voice thread that was more critical. It now required them to engage some of those higher order skills, more image comparison. And then every 3 to 4 units, we'd have a summative assessment. By the way, those voice threads are formative assessments. If you think about cooking like making, or if you think about learning like making soup, not that I have much experience with that, but as you're cooking, you have to taste it, right? You have to taste it and see how it tastes. Well, learning's the same way. And that's what the formative assessments allow students to do. And they're allowed to make mistakes in there. Just like you showed me teaching the student in the VoiceThread clip that I showed you. It's not about being right. It's about trying to apply the ideas and learning. And then in class, we work through. That's where we facilitate that learning together and tease out the problems. And those voice threads become resources for students that they study from later. And that was something else that I learned from my students. Never thought about it. Before the exams, they go back and listen to what each other had to say. It's really pretty phenomenal. And by the way, little plug for Katie from VoiceThread, who is a sponsor for the conference. She's willing to give everyone here a free pro VoiceThread account, which is $60 a year is what that costs. She's also raffling off a departmental license for VoiceThread today. I don't know when the raffles are happening. Maybe someone can clarify that, which is an $800 value, and offering discounts on departmental licensings for anyone who's interested after the conference if you mention OTC11. So I did integrate those mobile lectures into the classroom, as I said, but beyond some of the things that I talked about, and this is, again, old hat to a lot of you, but think about what that does to a student, how it empowers a student to learn when they're not required to sit there and listen to fleeting words and try to write them down and take notes. That's still possible with a mobile lecture, but now you can pause and rewind. How many students do you know who are going to feel confident raising their hand and saying, "Excuse me, professor, I didn't understand that. Will you please say that again?" Still didn't get that. Can you say it again? Still didn't get that. And we have to think about our students. I mean, I think about lecture as an exclusive learning environment, which is the contrary to inclusivity. Lecture is not the best method of learning for most students. I think about my dyslexic students. And so what do we tell them to do? Oh, well, we'll just record it and go listen to it later, right? Well, then in class, they're listening to it, and then they have to go home and listen to it again, and right? So it's creating a pretty much more, I would argue, inclusive learning environment for students. And also, I always had a significant number of ESL students in my class as well who were very supported by this model. So this is a synopsis or a showcase of one of the pre-class voice threads. Sorry, I don't have a watch. Who wears watches anymore? And I left opportunities for them to come in and comment and tell me how it's going. Here's a comment from one of my students on a pre-class voice thread.
An example of how women's access was limited was in 1770. The French Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture decreed that no more than 4 women could be members at one time. This means that another woman would have to die or forfeit their membership for another woman to have an opportunity in the academy. And as a struggling artist and a woman in that time, who would give up their seat for someone else?
And this is a post-class assessment.
Okay, between these two paintings, the gender relations between the men and the women are different but also similar. The one on the left, it looks as though she set down her binoculars to look at the painter. She's giving the painter her eye contact and shows that she knows she's being watched while the man continues to watch the play behind her. Okay,
I'm going to pause that. So again, it's going to the higher level learning skills with the post-class voice threads. And something else that I do, and this is a tip I shared a few years ago in an OTC, that I get a lot of thumbs up from, so I'm going to share it with you also. I have something called a wisdom wall in all of my classes. So this is regardless of the format that I've taught. I integrated the wisdom wall. And it's an opportunity at the end of a semester for students to share advice for success for incoming students the next term. And it's easy to do. At first I started doing this through email contributions, and I had all students, and they didn't get credit for this. They would email me the advice, and then I'd have to assemble it. Well, there's a much easier way to do that, and so what I began to do is either use a wiki for it or just a simple Google Docs page, which is what this page that you see on the screen, the screenshot here, was created with. Inserted an image at the top, put instructions down below, a heading, students would just go in and add their content, and then I could go in and change the font, or sometimes they get crazy with the colors, and I'd have to do some of that fixing that myself. But this is phenomenal. And then the next class, as the students are coming in, they're reading about the students' experiences, about how they learn from the blogs and the resources that the VoiceThread's created. And so it's not me telling them, it's their peers telling them, right? That kind of participatory model, they're going to listen to their peers way more.
Yes.
As they're feeling reluctant or uncertain about, new technologies, if they have this kind of feedback from the previous students, it's really pretty miraculous. And something else that I would really encourage us all as educators to think about is the value of using cell phones in class. And, I was in several classrooms here, and I noticed the no cell phones in big red writing on the wall. And so what we need to ask ourselves, is it really no cell phones? Or is it no talking with someone outside of the classroom about something that is non-relevant that we're saying, right? I mean, I had an interesting conversation last night with a community college instructor who was really frustrated because she's a part-time instructor and she wants to use cell phones in her class, and the program, I guess it was department chair, is telling her, no, you can't do it. We did call a friend surveys in my class. For example, the very first class in my women in art class, where I want to what I want to do is have students reach the objective to understand that there are very few women artists remembered in Western art history. But instead of telling them that, I wanted them to realize that. I could just tell them through the direct model, but I had them pick up their phones. I said, take out your phones and take 5 minutes. You can call as many people as you can call in 5 minutes. And when you're done, what I want you to do is call people you know and ask them to name 3 artists and write down the names of those artists, right? So they did that, and then we regrouped. We wrote down all the names and started the names of all the artists that were remembered, and there were a couple of women, Georgia O'Keeffe, Frida Kahlo, right? But that was it, and all the rest were men. And so it was through that participatory process that they were able to come to that objective rather than just having me tell them, which was much more meaningful, and they remember that way more. And what a kick to see them use their cell phones. They look at me like I'm absolutely insane. Think about using Poll Everywhere, which Sandy Haynes uses in her art history classes. It's a free service that allows for students without smartphones who have feature phones, which most students do have these days, with text messaging. And it basically turns a phone into a clicker. And so you can have them respond to questions that you've created prior to class with their phone. Poll Everywhere. Have students participate in a Twitter back channel like I've encouraged you to do. And there's a wonderful video on YouTube by a professor by the name of Dr. Monica Rankin at University of Texas, I believe. And she has a video that's discussing how she's using Twitter as a back channel to increase engagement from students in a large lecture class. And send scheduled tweets during class. That's something that I've been toying with. If you can think about prompts, questions that you could actually want your students to reply to, you can schedule them before your class begins. And those students who are following your Twitter feed will have those prompts to reply to. I'm going to skip through some of these, but these are, and I do have, by the way, this presentation has been shared on SlideShare, and I tweeted the link to it at 9 o'clock. So if you log into the portal, or if you go to Twitter and search for the hashed OTC, you're going to see the link. You can go to SlideShare and download this presentation on your own. But these are just some quotes from my students that are demonstrating deep learning, in my opinion. And I'm going to click through them a little bit more quickly so we have time to wrap up here. Yes?
Certain school districts have firewalls that restrict YouTube and different websites and things like that. When can we crack that code?
So the question is, districts, this is such an interesting question. School districts have security codes, or layers that prevent you from accessing YouTube. How can we crack that code? That's a conversation that's in motion everywhere. And again, it's about participating in that conversation to make that change. And it's imperative, and it is happening. You need to find those success stories and share them, right? And I think that's probably something we could talk about in one session in its own. But here's what's interesting to me. I talked to a K-12 teacher, and they're aching to use this stuff. And they're aching to get their students engaged. I talked to not all, but many professors in higher education, and there's an incredible reluctance, even though it's all available to them. Very interesting. So some student survey results. I had 27 respondents, which was a 77 response rate. 81% of the students were age 24 and under. So typically, people want to know what age demographic, what generation the students were from. The instructor used technology to support my learning. 100% of the students strongly agreed or agreed. Overall, how would you rate the quality of your learning experience in this class? 97% of the students strongly agreed or said, very successful or mostly successful. Having the option to read or listen to the lecture, this is my favorite, this part. Increased my ability to achieve the learning objectives. 92.5% of the students strongly agreed or agreed. Now, when given the option to read or listen, which did you choose? 40% chose to read. 15% chose to listen. 30% did both at the same time. 15% toggled between the two throughout the semester. When you're in a lecture hall, what's your only option? To listen. When we give students choices, they respond and they choose the choice that's going to meet their learning needs. And that to me is phenomenal. Why did you choose this lecture format? 67% because it meets my learning style, 22% most convenient, 11% it's what I'm used to doing. By completing the lectures outside the classroom, the time we spent was more relevant to my own learning. 81% strongly agreed or agreed. The effect on success and retention. I did an analysis of the success and retention from the time I taught this class on campus with the traditional lecture model, and that's in green, and the blue is the flipped classroom model. And I saw a 10% increase in success and a 12% increase in retention. The variety of the learning materials played a role in helping me reach the course learning objectives. All of the students strongly agreed or agreed. This class helped me understand how I learn best. 81% strongly agreed or agreed. And I have a clip of a student interview that I'd like to play. It's a couple of minutes long.
I think that it was awesome how you took into account every kind of learning, every way someone learns.
Learning styles?
Yeah. So you could read it, you could listen to it, and you also could be involved with it. I felt really involved with this class. I didn't think I was going to like it at all at first. I was like, I'm not going to take that. But with this, I learned more about myself as well as everything that we studied in this class than I've learned in any class I've ever taken. And it was awesome because I do learn, I learn very well visually, and I learn also really well listening to it, so that was just...
So the visual through probably the voice threads, which is very visually dominated, and then the listening through the podcast lectures, that was your option?
That was awesome because I could do it at the gym and just be okay, and then think about it, or while I was driving the car, when you're not focused on school. So that was just in your background of your head, and then it just kind of, you think about it during the day, and just random things will pop into your head. You'll be at lunch, you'll be like, oh my gosh, you're talking about some artist, and some artwork, or recently that Shopee ad. And you're like, oh yeah, well we heard about that in the voice thread, or I saw it on the voice thread, I heard about it in the learning.
So it recontextualizes your learning in a different way. Really what did you mean when you say you learn more about yourself, though? What about the class? What about the way the class was structured helped you learn more about yourself? That's interesting, because that's different from learning styles.
It helped me, realize, because I don't really know how well, in high school, it was so easy for me to learn everything. And now that I'm in college, like, it's different. Like, I'm not picking up things as easily, so it's helping me understand how I learn. As far as, like, which ways are best for me to, like, study and things like that.
So you got to understand how to learn. You learned how to learn.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It was really cool.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I've done.
Okay, that whole interview can be listened to on my website. It's 20 minutes long, and it's me and 3 students who gave me permission to share that. They were very excited for me to share that. So some reflections that I want to share as we kind of wrap this up. That was incredibly horrifying experience for me to do that. It was very scary. And I think that's why I was stuck in that mode for so long, making that transition in my on-campus classes. It's scary to give up power as a college professor like that. And I really did. Now I recognize that those lectures were kind of my security blanket. You know, they're going to come up with questions that I didn't know the answers to. That's okay, but we're going to find those out together. We're going to use the tools in our pockets to figure that out, and that's really where we were at. And that was really, really exciting to me. And that class, I got to know my students so much better. We formed such an amazing community. And with the pressure of having to cover content throughout the semester alleviated, I mean, we still had a schedule to follow. But we had time to sit down, and we watched one full-length feature movie in class, which I know is kind of that traditional push model, but it was amazing because we sat together as a story about 20th century artist Alice Neal, and I had students who were crying together. It was an amazing experience to watch that together, and I think it would have been different if we had the option to watch it online. And we also had the time to take a field trip to an artist studio and see a woman artist making art and talking about her art. We had more opportunities for those kinds of real world learning. I have one more thing that I want to get through, and then I'd be happy to take a question. So, as you sit there kind of figuring out where you fit in this whole spectrum and how you feel about participatory learning, I have a video that I found that I think illustrates the way I felt and the way I still feel. This feeling never goes away, that you may be able to identify with. I hope you can see this. If we can dim the lights, that'd be great. That's on YouTube. You can find it by searching for .dot. So that is the end of my presentation. I am happy to take questions if anyone has any. Thank you. Sure. That's a good question. So the question is, when you teach on campus and online, what's the size of each class? And where I was teaching at the time, it was the same on campus and online, and that was 40 students.
And now you realize we're doing 60, 65, 70 in a classroom, and online can be.
So the comment is we're doing 60 to 75 in a classroom, and online can be more. So what that says to me is we're in the instructional paradigm. That's our criteria, right? That's our external influences are pushing us into the instructional criteria, or the instructional paradigm. So if our priority is to be in the learning paradigm, then we need to participate in a process of making that change. And it's, I realize, not easy, but that is definitely, you know, a factor, is class size. And large class sizes are about instruction, value in the instruction versus the learning.
Is this on?
Hello. I don't know.
I'm really excited to flip my classroom. You're making me brave. Thank you very much. I teach math, and there's a particular class right now, pre-algebra, that I would like to flip. The thing that scares me the most, and maybe is the greatest pull for me not to do it, is flipping the classroom basically requires that you're assigning more outside of class, and you're requiring the student to do a lot more work outside of class. Mm-hmm. So like what I would like to do is offer more group work time, and time where, you know, we can focus on questions to their homework problems and things like that, rather than teaching them for the first time in the classroom. Mm-hmm. So what was your experience with that? Were students really balking at the idea of spending that much time out of class? Do you have any other?
Well, that's a question that I commonly get, and that it was one of my questions in my survey was, did you spend more time outside of class on a traditional class? And most students did say yes. Mm-hmm. But what I also find interesting about this conversation is there's been several studies done recently about how students in school are spending a significantly less time on their work outside of the classroom. So collectively, as an educational community, we're complaining about that. And we're saying that's not okay. But then as teachers, we're concerned about maybe a model that you think is going to be more effective when it comes to learning, but we're concerned about them doing more work outside the classroom. So what I can share with you is that I honestly did not have students complaining about it. Whether they complain to each other is a totally different story, you know, but I think what's really critical is that the expectations and the model be shared immediately. And I'm doing a presentation later today about how to use a Google site to share your class model and your expectations and your syllabi online at all times, so students can see that before they register. I mean, isn't that really what we should be doing?
Right.
So that the students who, if they have a choice these days, which I know is rare and far between, but they know what the class is like, the learning environment, and the expectations on them before they come to class the first day. That's never made sense to me, really. So I think that's, it's good to be concerned about that, but I mean, your priority is their learning. Right. And I think that that's what you need to communicate to your students. Excellent. So that they
Thank you.
Can believe that, they understand that.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Hi, kind of a follow-up to that. I did flip a class last year, and I videoed all my lectures through Camtasia in 20 to 30-minute pieces. And I told all the students to go watch the videos and then come to class, and then we're going to have hands-on. It's an accounting class. So I gave them the information in the video lecture, told them either read it or watch it, very similar to what you did.
Did they do it?
And I found that they didn't do it. They came to class and they said, okay, what do we do?
Right.
That
assessment piece. It's the assessment piece. I mean, that's what the role of the voice thread is for me, so that those voice threads, if they don't do those voice threads, they will fail the class. I mean, there's a significant amount, and they can't be late. They have to be done and completed before they come into the class. It doesn't mean you have to use voice thread. That's not the point here. The point is that some kind of assessment needs to be completed before they come to class, right? And that gives you an opportunity to look at the results, right? Mm. And it also demonstrates to you that they've done the work.
So it's a lot of the students that just said, I don't have time to do that before I come to class. I'm coming to class because you're supposed to teach me while I'm here.
You are going to
get over that barrier.
Yeah, this is a paradigm shift, right? And so it's a definite paradigm shift. And if they have to do that before they come to class, they're going to do that. I mean, I don't know, maybe other people have different ideas about that. But if they don't have to, they're not. And they're going to say to you, no, you teach me.
Well, I think it's because all the other professors do that.
Absolutely.
And I'm the only one that says, no, you listen to the lecture before you come to class. And they're just as reluctant as I was to flip it in the first place.
So, I don't know. I don't think there's a simple answer to this, but I really do believe that you are the leader. And your energy and your enthusiasm and your passion, and you conveying that to your students about why you're doing it, And how much more time is it going to take them to complete that assessment, right? So if you have the lectures out there and in the classroom, you need to tease. I agree. You need to kind of work through that. But I think it comes down ultimately to you and believing in the priority of learning. I don't know. I just think that you're the answer. And we are out of time, so I will be around for the rest of the day. I'm happy to talk to anyone else.